Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Trek Politics. I am here with my friend and co-host, Bob Seska. Oh, by the way, I married Trump, so there's that. It's always good to forget to introduce yourself. But Bob Seska, how are you?
I'm doing great, Mary. I'm hunkered down, ready to talk about the cloud minders.
That's right. We're talking about episode 21, season 3 of Star Trek, the original series. And I had a very specific reason for wanting to share this episode with all of you. And I hadn't watched it in a very long time. There was so much more relevant to what's happening today, Bob, that I'm really looking forward to discussing this with you. So here we go. The Cloud Minders. Let's dive in.
Incoming transmission.
Trek Politics with Mary L. Trump and Bob Seska.
So, Bob, the original reason I thought we should watch The Cloud Minders was because it tackled the class divide in a very interesting way that's very relevant to our times. As we know, the rich are getting much richer. The middle class and the poor are losing ground by the day. Wealth inequality is a serious not just problem, but is presenting serious dangers to the future of civilization. And that's essentially the premise around which Cloud Minders is based. So why don't you sum the episode up for us and we can talk about the other elements that are relevant I'd completely forgotten about.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Teleplay by Margaret Arman, story by David Gerald, he of Trouble with Tribbles, that was his other great episode, and Oliver Crawford contributing to the story, directed by Judd Taylor. And Mary, in the Cloud Minders, the Enterprise is dispatched to the planet Ardana to retrieve a mineral called Zenite, which will mitigate a botanical plague on Merrick 2. Kirk and Spock beam down and discover two classes of people on Ardana, a wealthy ruling class living in a cloud city called Stratos, and a subjugated working class called troglodytes, or not troglodytes, troglites, which is derived from troglodytes, of course, exploited for their labor in the Zenite mines. Kirk and Spock attempt to get the Zenite before it's too late for Merrick 2, while not really helping the oppressed troglites all that much in the end. And as always, Mary, spoilers ahead.
Absolutely. So the idea of this class divide, which is not apparent at the beginning, when Kirk and Spock beam down to get the Zenite, they are unaware that there is an underclass of workers who mine the Zenite and are an oppressed people. And they're in such a rush to get the Zenite to this planet that is about to experience essentially a plague that's going to wipe everybody out, that they dispense with the formalities of visiting Stratos for diplomatic reasons. And yet, when they beam down to the planet, the Zenite is not there. So clearly, there was a plot to kidnap Kirk and Spock to force Stratos to deal with the fact that it has been oppressing more than half the population. But what we know at the beginning is that Stratos is this highly advanced civilization that is dedicated to art, which sounds great, doesn't it?
Yes.
Because, our overlords seem only interested in acquiring more wealth and power, and the arts be damned. So, it's a deceptively lovely idea. And then, of course, we find out the people of Stratos are oppressing an entire people. There's also this thread of eugenics going throughout. And as we learn, it's because xenon produces an invisible gas that impedes the ability of the human brain to form sufficiently. And there are measurable differences, but it's not because there is something inherently inferior to the troglodytes. It's because they've been exposed to this poison, and that's very intentional. And it serves the people of Stratos. So there's this added complexity on top of the outright classism going on.
Oh yeah, yeah. And Mary, I'm so glad that you suggested that we talk about this episode for a number of reasons. Primarily among them is the fact that we've talked about several episodes in a row of Star Trek where the allegory circles around war and certainly weapons proliferation and so on. But this one, as you said, is refreshing from the perspective that it covers social justice. In addition to what you were saying about eugenics and so forth, we're talking about labor exploitation, income inequality, racial and ethnic oppression, oligarchy. It's kind of another if it rains, it pours episode of Star Trek because there's a lot of things going on simultaneously. And going to this gas that you were talking about, the gas that comes from mining Xenite, which is one of the things that's oppressing the troglodyte people, keeping them in a state of arrested development, so to speak. One of the first things I thought of was the crack cocaine epidemic and how it hit low income, predominantly Black communities the hardest. White society oppressed Black society by denying them socioeconomic advancement, then demonized those communities when some of them had no choice but to resort to drug trafficking in order to survive. It's the racist catch-22, Mary, plus harsh and unequal sentencing for crack cocaine. We get into that too. But when I rewatched this episode, that's the first thing I went to when it came to this gas that comes from Xenite and how that's integral in the oppression of the labor on this planet, the labor tasked with mining the Xenite itself, which is so lucrative for the ruling wealthy class. So that's one of the many allegories of just a long list of things that apply to this episode.
Yeah, I mean, the very real way in which the oppressing class benefits from exploiting the underclass by exposing it to something that has significant and deleterious effects on its ability to succeed, and then turns around and blames them for engaging in the kinds of behavior that are in some ways the logical outcome of being treated so horribly, being so oppressed, and being exposed essentially to poison.
Exactly. And the other dimension to all of this too is, are the troglodyte disruptors, which is a sort of a subculture within the troglodytes that's trying to attain equality, some sort of freedom, some sort of better working conditions, some sort of piece of the overall economic pie on this planet, are they freedom fighters or are they terrorists? It's the age-long question.
Yeah, and the other fundamental analogy, of course, is to slavery, in which the benefits that the rich whites were afforded were created by the people to whom they were denied. And then the people who actually made possible the best of the society were not just kept out, but were told, and the myth was perpetuated that they were not evolved enough to enjoy it anyway. So what difference does it make if they continue to be enslaved? And that's pretty much where the troglodytes are at the beginning of this episode. Speaking of terrorism, I mean, maybe it's a little too extreme to describe what Kirk does as terrorism, but there's a bit of a twist here. Kirk has never been much of a diplomat. Which, quite frankly, I can relate to. I could never be a diplomat because it requires things I'm just not comfortable doing. It requires doing things like, I don't know, shaking hands with mass murderers on occasion and negotiating with people who are monsters, etc. But they're desperate. They are desperate on the Enterprise to save the entire population of another planet. And Kirk is, on the one hand, it seems willing to try to negotiate, but then a line gets crossed. And I'm curious to know what you think of the line, because we talk a lot about the ways in which the Prime Directive gets, the line, I guess, gets crossed. So given the fact that this is a very urgent situation that has to do with a third party that is not actually part of the episode at all,
Mhm.
and that both sides in the conflict know, the Troglodytes and the people on Stratos know what's at stake. I'm just curious. It felt like it took a really weird turn.
Yeah.
And then because McCoy discovers that a simple face mask, no, I did not have flashback to COVID, can not just protect people from the effects of exposure to xenite gas, but it can reverse it.
Mhm.
So Kirk thinks, oh, that's the simple solution. And who couldn't possibly agree with that?
Yeah.
Neither side chooses to believe him. And then what happens is kind of weird.
Yeah, so I think you were exactly right when you said Kirk isn't much of a diplomat, because two things happen that emphasize your observation there. One is he kidnaps Places to prove that the gas, the xenite gas, mentally impairs anyone who breathes that in. So he beams Places down into this cave, and then they proceed to fight. So that's one way that Kirk is kind of shoving his nose in it, saying,
Mhm.
okay, how dare you doubt that this is going on? We're just going to try it on you. We're going to, against your will, we're going to make you breathe this xenite gas so you discover what's been going on with the troglodytes all this time. And then the next thing was, and this is, forgive me for jumping to the end,
Uh-huh.
but I feel as though the solution was the weakest part of this episode. I thought this was a strong episode until we get to the end, where Kirk is basically like, well, troglodytes, here are your masks. We're out. We're leaving. Bye. We're gonna skedaddle
Yeah.
and just leave you with these masks, but still with all of the labor exploitation and the income inequality. All of those social injustices are kind of left intact in lieu of having, well, at least you got the masks, so at least you're not breathing in the gas anymore. So that's something. And that's how it ended up resolving.
Yeah, and then we're left with the possibility that there will be a sufficient number of cloud dwellers to see the light.
Yeah.
So, for example, Placidus's daughter Droxine makes the choice to go down to the surface.
Hmm.
I guess to do her part to try to mend fences or experience what the troglodytes experience. It's not entirely clear, but
Yeah.
it is a very unsatisfying conclusion, and
Mm.
it doesn't make any sense actually, because what was the point? Just to make the troglodytes just more intellectually capable slaves?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
or oppressed people? Because there is a
Hmm.
lot, as you've mentioned, there is a lot of discussion throughout the episode, of very high-minded conversations about inequality and racism and class differences, which don't exist in
Hmm.
the Star Trek universe anymore, or I should say in the Federation, the United Federation of Planets anymore. So you would think that Kirk would be more invested in forcing a better solution for both the troglodytes and the cloud dwellers. So it's not just that he cops out exactly. It's almost like he just loses interest or something. It's very odd, because clearly the all along we're told that yes, it's a problem that these people are being exposed to this invisible poisonous gas that has a serious negative impact on them and their ability to live their lives. But the bigger issue is that they are an oppressed class, and they
Hmm.
are being oppressed by purposefully in order to support the lifestyles of those who oppress them.
Hmm.
So weird to me
Yeah.
how, and especially given the fact that he was willing to kidnap two people, put them in a cave together at phaser point, and
Mhm.
then maybe potentially have a fight to the death with Placis. It seemed like he was really invested in this. Also, the fact that there were no repercussions for
No.
his having done any of that, a little odd.
Absolutely not. Yeah, yeah. And to be clear, Ardana is a member of the Federation. The planet somehow made it into the Federation, knowing two things are going on there: that
Well,
vast income inequality, and
mm,
at the same time, torture. There's a scene where one of the troglodyte, or the leader of the troglodyte disruptors, is tortured using this
yeah.
laser device right after Droxine said, "Oh, we're not a violent society except for the torture." So,
You know what?
yeah.
I'm glad you. I completely forgot about that because on the one hand, I think I forgot about it because how in the world could
Yeah.
Ardana be a member of the Federation? I guess the Federation doesn't do its due diligence, which we know is not the case, right?
Right. Mm.
So, and the other reason that's relevant is because then the Prime Directive is not operative.
Right.
So that part of it was very, very confusing. How in the world
Yeah.
could this planet be a member of the Federation when really the easiest way around all of this would have been to threaten them with expulsion and
Mhm.
sanctions.
Yeah. Plus, it seems odd that the Federation is there to pick up this Xenite consignment, and while at the same time turning a blind eye to the injustices that are happening on this planet. Seems a little exploitative to me. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm misreading that.
Well,
So,
well, I mean, what's more mystifying to me is how the Enterprise crew seems not to have known any of what
mhm.
was going on. And although on the one hand, I understand the urgency behind the mission and Kirk saying, I promise we'll be right back, but we have to go save tens of millions of people.
Yeah.
Just as I understand the troglodyte skepticism, but it it's more that they seem not to have been aware of the serious social injustices and the war crimes that the Cloudminders are perfectly re- capable of and willing to commit just to get information. I mean, as you mentioned,
Right.
they tortured
Mm.
tortured Vanna to get her to reveal the location, and Kirk, shook his finger at them, but
Oh, yeah.
no mention made ever of their Federation membership being at risk or any other kinds of sanctions.
Absolutely not. It's kind of surprising. And I wonder, when it comes to the role of the Federation and how this planet is somehow a member of the Federation while having these social injustices. I would love to see if we could somehow see the David Gerald original, like, first draft
Uh,
of this script,
uh,
and actually see that play out in a fully produced episode,
yeah,
because I think some of these problems may have arisen. And I get the sense, seeing some of David Gerald's quotes about this episode, I get the sense that it was a script that in the end didn't really bear out the way he had hoped it had played out, because of subsequent rewrites and so on, other
yeah,
people getting involved.
yeah. I
So
guess
maybe there was that first draft, maybe that did cover some of these issues that we're talking about, and it just got lost in the mix of production.
yeah. It definitely the plot definitely loses its way.
Yeah.
And in a minute, I'm going to ask you your how you placed this episode, but first, my favorite segment, Bob's Reviews.
Ah,
So,
yes. All right, Mary. So Placis would probably be a welcome guest, and you kind of hinted at this. He'd probably be a welcome guest on the Joe Rogan podcast, and here's why. When Kirk explains how a mask can filter out the Xenite gas, Placis says, quote, "How can a mere filter accomplish what centuries of evolution have failed to do?" So that should sound eerily familiar. You said it best. It's hearkening right back to COVID. Placis is an anti-masker. So that
yeah,
shows while they consider themselves to be evolved and intelligent and sophisticated, they're still in this weird thing that harkens back to 2020 United States, and
oh boy,
just this ridiculous bro science that we all lived through tragically.
yeah.
So While we're talking about headgear, according to Memory Alpha, the miner's goggles would later reappear in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, in which they were worn by Khan when he confronts Chekhov on SETI Alpha 5. Yeah. So that initial scene with the horrible worm that goes into Chekhov's ear. And also, I love that Droxine is way more into Spock than Kirk. Early on, she says, Kirk and his very attractive officer. Way to go, Mr. Spock. That was great. Yeah.
And there was something between them.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
And then it gets super creepy with Vanna in Kirk's quarters trying to murder him. And then Kirk is like, oh, this is great. I'm really enjoying this, quite honestly.
Yeah. Oh, boy.
Kirk is going to Kirk, right?
Yeah.
Oh, and speaking of Spock, which, by the way, is a great name for a podcast.
It is.
Speaking of Spock, yeah. We hear a rare voiceover by Nimoy that isn't presented as a log entry. It's just Spock's thoughts, which also is another great name for a Star Trek podcast. Anyway.
Better than Spock's brain, that's for sure.
Yes, anything's better than Spock's brain, for sure. Incidentally, Kirk also has an internal monologue scene in the episode The Paradise Syndrome. So it's not the first time for Star Trek, but it's just one of those rare occasions where it's not a captain's log. It's just, in this case, Spock's thoughts, coming this summer to Apple Podcasts. Anyway, Spock also openly discussed Pon farr with Droxine.
Oh.
But as we remember in Amok Time, he says that such ceremonies are not fit for discussion with outworlders. So, but violating a key Vulcan rule when it comes to the Pon farr. Oh, and one last Spock thing, Mary. Unless Spock was sleeping off camera, he complains to Droxine that her, quote, movements awakened him. But the last we saw of Spock, he was thinking out loud while seated. He wasn't sleeping. So either he lied to Droxine or he took a nap off camera.
I think he was flirting.
That's his opening line. Your movements awakened me. Sure, I hear that all the time, Mr. Spock. Yeah. So next up here, there's an awkward production moment early on when Kirk says, "Who are you? What is the meaning of this attack?" But his mouth doesn't move. Yep. Obviously, this line was dubbed, in post-production. Yes. I think they failed to shoot the line.
Yeah.
I think they just forgot to shoot that. So they added it in post, though the way they added it in post was really noticeable and awkward because Kirk just isn't talking. His mouth isn't moving at all, not even close, not even similar mouth movements. And finally, Mary, according to Memory Alpha, the image of the planet River seen from the Cloud City balcony is a dry river basin in southern Yemen taken by astronauts on the Gemini 4 orbital mission in 1965.
Okay, that's cool.
Yes, so awesome. And that they included that in this episode representing the surface of Ardana as seen from the Cloud City above. So that's it, Mary. That's the Bobservations for this episode.
All right. We've got to wrap this up, but I'm just curious where you place this episode in the pantheon of original series episodes.
As far as allegory goes, I would put this maybe in the top 10 for me of the original series. The somewhat weak ending aside, I can't deny how many bases they tried to cover with this. And I don't consider that necessarily a bad thing. I think this is Star Trek doing what Star Trek is best at. I know I've seen some reviews indicating that it was a little heavy-handed in the allegory, but maybe it had to be. Maybe this is an issue that deserves to be more overt than subtle. So in that regard, I think job well done, message received for sure. I would say this is a good one.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it as high. Not because I thought it didn't work allegorically. I think it did, and it did pack a lot in that is again just shockingly continues to be relevant today. But there were too many logical inconsistencies, too many questions about how Ardana could possibly have been in the Federation. How is it possible that a captain of a starship took two people hostage at Fraser Point and suffered no consequences, just stuff like that. And just the ignorance of the Enterprise crew and just not understanding how this society worked, or I guess I should say the Federation's ignorance. Just a lot of it just didn't track for me in that way. But that aside, I did, and also the ending, the very weak ending aside, I did find it really interesting in a lot of ways, and it hit a lot of the point that you and I both like that hit in Star Trek episodes. It was very talky, and I think I personally I like the way Star Trek hits us over the head sometimes. So in that regard, a very successful one. So we hope you all enjoyed this episode. And if you haven't watched The Cloudminders, absolutely go check it out and let us know what you think. And we will be back next week for another episode of Trek Politics. Thanks, everybody.